What if one of the most powerful books ever written about success wasn't actually about success at all? More than 2,500 years ago, an ancient Chinese military strategist named Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War, a book designed to help generals win battles. Yet today, it's studied by entrepreneurs, athletes, business leaders, psychologists, and millions of ordinary people around the world. Why has a book about war survived for over 2,000 years? Because it isn't really about fighting. It's about thinking. It's about making smart decisions, understanding people, controlling your emotions, and knowing when to act and when not to. Hello everyone, I'm Clara, and welcome back. In today's lesson, we'll discover why The Art of War is considered one of the greatest books ever written. At the same time, you'll naturally improve your English through advanced vocabulary, useful expressions, and clear explanations in context, making this an enjoyable way to build both your language skills and your critical thinking. Today, we'll explore 5 powerful lessons from this timeless masterpiece. Lesson number 1. Why the greatest victory is winning without fighting. Lesson number 2. Why knowing yourself is the foundation of every success. Lesson number 3. How preparation determines the outcome before the battle even begins. Lesson number 4. Why flexibility is one of the greatest strengths you can develop. Lesson number 5. How strategic thinking can completely change the way you approach life. Let's begin with the first lesson and discover why Sun Tzu believed that the smartest warriors are often the ones who fight the least. Lesson number 1. The greatest victory is winning without fighting. Imagine 2 kings preparing for war. The first king is confident. He has a massive army, powerful weapons, and thousands of soldiers ready to fight. He believes victory comes from strength alone. The second king is much quieter. Instead of rushing into battle, he spends weeks studying his enemy. He gathers information, understands their weaknesses, and looks for a way to achieve his goal without risking thousands of lives. Now here's the question. Who do you think Sun Tzu would admire? Surprisingly, not the king with the biggest army. He would choose the second one. One of the most famous ideas in the art of war is this. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. At first, that sounds strange. How can you win a war without fighting? To understand this, we first need to understand what Sun Tzu believed success really meant. Most people think winning means defeating someone after a difficult battle. Sun Tzu thought differently. He believed the smartest victory is the one that costs the least. If you can solve a conflict through preparation, negotiation, strategy, or simply making your opponent give up before the battle even begins, you've already won. That idea was revolutionary more than 2,000 years ago, and it's still revolutionary today. Here's a useful English expression. Pick your battles. Native speakers use this expression when they mean you shouldn't waste your energy fighting every disagreement or every problem. For example, I could argue with my coworker about every little mistake, but I'd rather pick my battles. Notice how similar this is to Sun Tzu's philosophy. Being intelligent isn't about fighting more. It's about knowing when fighting is actually necessary. Let's bring this into modern life. Imagine 2 business owners launching similar companies. The first spends all day criticizing competitors, arguing online, and trying to prove they're better than everyone else. The second focuses on improving the quality of their product, understanding their customers, and building trust. Years later, which business is more likely to succeed? Usually it's the second one. Why? Because their energy went into creating value instead of creating conflict. This is exactly what Sun Tzu encourages. Don't waste your resources on unnecessary battles. Use them wisely. The same lesson applies to learning English. Many learners spend months worrying about making mistakes. They avoid conversations because they want every sentence to be perfect. In a way, they're fighting the wrong battle. The real goal isn't speaking perfect English. It's communicating clearly and becoming more confident every day. When you stop trying to win every small battle, you make much faster progress. Psychologists have found something interesting about conflict. When people feel emotionally attacked, a part of the brain called the amygdala becomes more active. This area is involved in detecting threats. As a result, logical thinking often becomes more difficult, and people are more likely to react impulsively instead of making thoughtful decisions. Sun Tzu understood this long before modern neuroscience existed. He repeatedly emphasized calm thinking over emotional reactions. He knew that people who lose control of their emotions often make poor decisions. That lesson is incredibly relevant today. Think about social media. How many arguments begin because someone reacts immediately instead of taking a moment to think? A single comment turns into hours of conflict. Stress increases. Relationships suffer. Yet almost nothing meaningful is achieved. Sometimes, the strongest move is choosing not to fight at all. That's not weakness, it's discipline, it's confidence, and it's strategy. Before making an important decision this week, ask yourself one simple question. Is this battle worth fighting? That question alone can save you time, energy, and unnecessary stress. Because real strength isn't measured by how many conflicts you win. It's measured by how wisely you choose them. That's exactly why the art of war is still studied today. It's not teaching us how to defeat other people. It's teaching us how to make better decisions before conflict even begins. Lesson number 2. Know yourself before you try to understand others. Imagine you're about to play a game of chess against someone you've never met. Before the match begins, you spend hours studying their previous games. You learn their favorite openings, their habits, and the mistakes they often make. That sounds like a smart strategy, doesn't it? But imagine forgetting to study your own game. You don't know your own strengths. You don't know your weaknesses. You panic under pressure. You lose focus easily. You become impatient. Even with perfect knowledge of your opponent, your chances of winning become much smaller. This is exactly what Sun Tzu wanted people to understand. One of the most famous lines from The Art of War says, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles." Most people focus on the first half of that sentence, know the enemy. But the second half may be even more important, know yourself. Why? Because the biggest obstacle in life is often not another person. It's ourselves, our emotions, our fears, our habits, our impulsive decisions, our overconfidence. Here's a useful English expression. Take a hard look at yourself. This doesn't mean looking into a mirror. It means being completely honest about your own strengths and weaknesses. For example, before blaming other people, I decided to take a hard look at myself. Native speakers often use this expression when talking about personal growth. And that's exactly what Sun Tzu encourages. Long before you face any challenge, understand the person who will be making the decisions. You. Let's think about learning English. Many students compare themselves with fluent speakers. They say, "She's better than me. He learns faster than I do. I'll never speak like that." But they're asking the wrong question. Instead of comparing yourself with someone else, ask, "What am I already good at?" Maybe your listening has improved. Maybe your vocabulary is much larger than it was 6 months ago. Maybe you're becoming more confident speaking, even if you still make mistakes. Knowing yourself isn't about criticizing yourself. It's about seeing yourself clearly. Psychologists call this self-awareness, and it's one of the strongest predictors of personal growth. People with high self-awareness recognize their emotional patterns. They notice when they're becoming impatient. They know what motivates them. They understand what distracts them. And because they understand themselves, they make better decisions. Imagine 2 managers leading the same company. The first manager believes they're always right. They never accept feedback. Every mistake is someone else's fault. The second manager regularly asks their team, "What could I do better? What am I missing? How can I improve?" Which manager would you rather work for? The second one, of course. Not because they're perfect, but because they're willing to learn. That's another timeless lesson from Sun Tzu. Confidence is valuable, but overconfidence is dangerous. History gives us countless examples. Many powerful leaders lost important battles not because they lacked resources, but because they underestimated their opponents and overestimated themselves. Success made them careless. Sun Tzu warned against this more than 2,000 years ago. He believed that wisdom begins with humility. When you accept that you don't know everything, you become open to learning. And learning gives you an advantage that pride never can. This lesson also applies to everyday relationships. Sometimes, an argument continues because both people are trying to prove they're right. Very few people stop and ask, "Could I be seeing this situation differently?" That simple question often changes the entire conversation. Knowing yourself means recognizing your own emotions before they control your actions. It means understanding your strengths without becoming arrogant. And it means accepting your weaknesses without believing they define you. Because once you truly understand yourself, you become much harder to defeat, not only by other people, but also by fear, frustration, and self-doubt. Sun Tzu believed that every great victory begins long before the battle starts. It begins with clarity, and clarity always starts from within. Lesson number 3. Preparation wins the battle before it begins. Imagine two students preparing for the same English exam. The first student opens the textbook the night before the test. They stay awake until 2 in the morning, trying to memorize hundreds of new words. They feel stressed, overwhelmed, and hope for the best. The second student has been studying for just 20 minutes a day over the past 3 months. They reviewed vocabulary regularly, practiced listening, and took small quizzes every week. Now ask yourself, who has the better chance of succeeding? The answer seems obvious, not because one student is more intelligent, but because one student prepared long before the challenge arrived. That idea sits at the very heart of the art of war. Sun Tzu believed that victory doesn't begin on the battlefield. It begins during preparation. Long before armies meet, long before a decision is made, and long before anyone realizes who will win. Here's one of his most famous ideas. Every battle is won before it is ever fought. Of course, he didn't mean that the result is magical or predetermined. He meant that success is often created by the choices we make before the real challenge begins. Here's a useful English expression. Leave nothing to chance. Native speakers use this expression when they prepare so carefully that they don't rely on luck. For example, before giving his presentation, he practiced every day and left nothing to chance. That's exactly how Sun Tzu believed successful people should think. Preparation isn't exciting. It doesn't usually receive applause. Nobody celebrates the hours you spend quietly learning, practicing, planning, or improving yourself. But those invisible hours often create the visible results everyone notices later. Think about professional athletes. When we watch an Olympic final, we see a race that lasts less than 10 seconds. What we don't see are the thousands of hours spent training before that moment. The medal isn't won in 10 seconds. It's won during the years that came before. The same principle applies almost everywhere. A successful business presentation begins long before the meeting. A confident job interview starts days before you walk into the room. A fluent English conversation begins with the listening practice, vocabulary review, and speaking exercises you've done over many months. Preparation quietly builds confidence. Psychologists explain this through something called self-efficacy, your belief that you can successfully complete a task. Interestingly, that confidence doesn't usually appear because you tell yourself positive words. It grows because you've prepared. The more experience you gain, the more evidence your brain collects that says, "I've done difficult things before. I can do this again." That's real confidence, not pretending, not hoping, but trusting the work you've already done. Unfortunately, many people confuse confidence with optimism. They say, "Everything will be fine." Sun Tzu would probably ask, "What have you done to make sure it will be fine?" That's a very different question. Optimism without preparation is simply wishful thinking. Preparation turns optimism into strategy. History offers countless examples of this lesson. During World War II, the Allied forces spent months secretly preparing for the Normandy landings, known as D-Day. They didn't rely on courage alone. They gathered intelligence, studied maps, trained soldiers, created backup plans, and even used deception to confuse the enemy. When the operation finally began, Much of the success came from preparation that had happened long before the first soldier reached the beach. Sun Tzu would have understood that perfectly. He believed the best leaders reduce uncertainty before taking action. Now let's bring this back to everyday life. Suppose you know you'll have an important conversation in English next week. Instead of worrying about making mistakes, why not prepare? Practice common questions. Review useful vocabulary. Speak out loud. Listen to similar conversations. When the day arrives, you'll still feel nervous, but you'll also feel ready. And readiness changes everything. Preparation doesn't eliminate fear. It gives you something stronger than fear. It gives you confidence built on action. That's why successful people often appear calm under pressure. It's not because pressure doesn't affect them. It's because they've already done the hard work before anyone was watching. Sun Tzu wanted us to understand that waiting until the battle begins is already too late. The real work happens beforehand. Whether you're building a career, learning English, starting a business, or chasing any meaningful goal, remember this. Success rarely belongs to the person who reacts the fastest. It usually belongs to the person who prepared the best. Lesson number 4. The strongest people know how to adapt. Imagine two trees standing side by side during a violent storm. One tree is tall, thick, and completely rigid. It refuses to bend, believing that strength means never moving. The other tree is thinner. As the wind grows stronger, it bends with every powerful gust. It looks weaker at first, but when the storm finally passes, it's still standing. The first tree has snapped in half. Which one was truly stronger? This simple image perfectly captures one of the greatest lessons from the art of war. Sun Tzu understood something that many people still struggle to accept today. Real strength is not about resisting every change. It's about adapting to it. Here's a useful English expression. Go with the flow. Native speakers use this expression when they mean to adapt naturally to changing situations instead of fighting them unnecessarily. For example, our travel plans changed because of the weather, so we just went with the flow. This doesn't mean giving up. It means being flexible enough to find another path when the original one no longer works. That's exactly how Sun Tzu believed great leaders should think. One of his most famous ideas is that a good general never uses the same strategy in every battle. Why? Because every situation is different. Every opponent is different. Every challenge brings new conditions. If you always react the same way, sooner or later, life becomes predictable, and predictable people are easier to defeat. Think about how quickly our world changes. 20 years ago, very few people imagined working from home. Artificial intelligence wasn't part of everyday conversations. Many of today's most popular jobs didn't even exist. Now imagine someone who refuses to learn anything new because they believe, "This is how I've always done it." At first, they may feel comfortable. But little by little, the world moves forward while they stay exactly where they are. Eventually, their greatest strength becomes their biggest weakness. Psychologists call this cognitive flexibility. It's the ability to adjust your thinking when new information appears. People with high cognitive flexibility don't panic when circumstances change. Instead, they ask, "What's another way to solve this problem?" That question opens the door to creativity. Let's connect this to learning English. Many learners believe there's only one correct method. Some spend years memorizing grammar rules. Others only watch movies. Some only read books. Then they become frustrated because progress feels slow. The most successful learners usually do something different. They adapt. If one method isn't working, they try another. They combine listening with speaking, reading with conversation, vocabulary with real-life practice. They're not loyal to one technique. They're loyal to improvement. That's a huge difference. History gives us an incredible example of this lesson. During his military campaigns, Alexander the Great often faced enemies with larger armies. Instead of attacking the same way every time, he constantly changed his tactics depending on the landscape, the weather, and the strengths of his opponents. His ability to adapt helped him build one of the largest empires of the ancient world. Although Alexander lived after Sun Tzu, Both men understood the same principle. Victory belongs to those who can adjust faster than everyone else. Now think about your own life. Have you ever spent months trying to solve a problem in exactly the same way? Maybe it was learning a skill, improving your health, growing a business, or building better relationships. Sometimes we become so attached to one approach that we forget to ask a simple question. What if there's a better way? That question has changed countless lives. Sun Tzu believed that intelligent people observe first, then adapt. They don't let their ego stop them from changing direction. Because changing your strategy is not a sign of failure. Sometimes, it's the smartest decision you can make. The world will continue to change. Technology will change. Opportunities will change. Challenges will change. The question is, will you change with them? The people who thrive are rarely the ones who know everything. They're the ones who keep learning, adjusting, and growing. Like the tree that bends during the storm, their flexibility becomes their greatest strength. And perhaps that's one of the most practical lessons the art of war can teach us today. Not just to be strong, but to be adaptable. Because in the long run, adaptability often beats raw strength. Lesson number 5. The best leaders think long-term. Imagine two farmers. The first farmer wants results as quickly as possible. Every day he checks the soil, wondering why his crops haven't grown yet. He becomes impatient, changes his methods every week, and eventually gives up because he doesn't see immediate success. The second farmer understands that nature has its own rhythm. He prepares the soil, plants the seeds, waters them consistently, and waits. He knows that some of the most valuable things in life cannot be rushed. Months later, only one farmer has a healthy harvest. Why? Because one was chasing quick results, the other was building lasting success. This is one of the deepest lessons hidden inside the art of war. Although the book is famous for its military strategies, Sun Tzu repeatedly reminds us that great leaders don't think only about today's victory, they think about tomorrow's consequences. Here's a useful English expression. Play the long game. Native speakers use this expression when they mean making decisions that create bigger rewards in the future instead of looking for immediate satisfaction. For example, learning a new language takes time, so you have to play the long game. That expression perfectly captures Sun Tzu's philosophy. He believed that rushing into action without thinking about the future often creates bigger problems than the ones you're trying to solve. Think about how many decisions people regret because they only focused on the present. Buying things they can't afford, reacting with anger during an argument, quitting a project because progress feels slow, choosing comfort instead of discipline. In the moment, those decisions may feel good. But weeks, months, or even years later, the consequences become clear. Sun Tzu teaches us to pause before acting. Instead of asking, "What do I want right now?" he encourages us to ask, "Where will this decision lead me?" That single question changes the way you think. Psychologists describe something similar through the idea of delayed gratification, the ability to resist an immediate reward in order to achieve a greater one later. One of the most famous studies on this topic involved children who were offered one marshmallow immediately or 2 marshmallows if they waited. While the study has been discussed and refined over the years, it highlighted an important idea. The ability to think beyond the present can influence the choices we make throughout life. Sun Tzu understood this centuries before psychology became a science. He knew that discipline is often the bridge between today's effort and tomorrow's success. Let's connect this to learning English. Many learners become discouraged after only a few weeks. They think, "I've been studying every day, but I'm still not fluent." That's like planting a seed on Monday and expecting a tree by Friday. Language learning doesn't work that way. Neither does building confidence. Neither does developing wisdom. Real growth is usually invisible before it becomes obvious. Then, one day, you suddenly realize you're understanding movies more easily, speaking with greater confidence, or thinking directly in English. People call it overnight success, but you know the truth. It was built one day at a time. History gives us another example. When the Great Wall of China was constructed over many centuries, No single worker could see the finished wall. Each person completed a small section, trusting that their work would become part of something much larger. The same principle applies to our own lives. Every small decision matters. Every book you read, every conversation you practice, every healthy habit you build, every moment you choose patience over impulse. Little by little, those choices shape your future. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson in the art of war. The book isn't really teaching us how to defeat other people. It's teaching us how to defeat impatience, poor judgment, emotional reactions, and short-term thinking. Those are often the real enemies standing between us and the life we want. If there's one idea I'd like you to remember from today's episode, it's this. The strongest strategy isn't always the fastest one. Sometimes, the wisest decision is to prepare carefully, to observe before acting, to remain flexible when circumstances change, to understand yourself honestly, and to keep thinking beyond today's challenge. That's why the art of war has survived for more than 2,000 years. Its lessons aren't limited to battlefields. They apply to classrooms, businesses, relationships, careers, and everyday life. The world has changed dramatically since Sun Tzu wrote this book. Human nature hasn't, and perhaps that's why his words continue to inspire millions of readers across generations.